Welcome to Chapter 9, Hypothesis Testing. As always, pause the video often, take notes, complete the problems with me, and try the problems on your own. In 9.1, we're going to be doing all the introductory components to hypothesis testing. So what a hypothesis test does is it resolves conflicts between two competing opinions, and we express those two competing opinions as the null hypothesis, or H sub 0, and the alternative hypothesis H sub A. You might see that H sub 1 in other textbooks. And so when we're dealing with the null hypothesis, this is the presumed default or the status quo. And then we always want to make sure we're contradicting. So one statement will always contradict the other. And the decision point here, so whenever they talk about like the decision point, is we're always talking about the null. So we either reject the null hypothesis or we do not reject the null hypothesis. You'll notice we don't say we reject the null or accept the alternative. It's always we always use null. So we're rejecting the null or we're not rejecting the null. So first we want to learn how to write these. It's really important that you remember that the null hypothesis always includes equality. So it's either the equal to sign, or it's got the greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. I will put up some inequality words in a moment to remind you like at least and more than and things like that. And then we're always contradicting in the other one. So there can be a one-tailed versus a two-tailed test, and the alternative hypothesis determines the tail type. So we always look to the alternative hypothesis to determine the tail type. So if you have a one-tailed test and it's going in this direction, this we would call actually a left-tailed test because it's going in that direction, and the alternative hypothesis would have actually this symbol. If it was going to the right, it was a right-tailed test. The alternative hypothesis would have an inequality symbol going that way. This is, again, a less than, and this is a greater than, if you're someone who's struggled in the past. And then a two-tailed test will be when your alternative hypothesis is not equal to. And what this is these are the rejection areas. So if in a one-tailed test, we reject the null in that region. And on a two-tailed test, we reject on either side of the null hypothesis in those two regions. So how do you start a hypothesis test? First, you want to read, okay, am I talking about the mean or am I talking about the proportion? Population proportion. So a clue, if you're talking about the proportion, is it'll be a percent, a decimal, or a fraction. Mean, you're going to have words like average. Once you know you're talking about the mu or the p, then you identify the null and alternative hypothesis. And we're going to do examples of that, so don't worry. And then you determine whether it's a one-tailed test or two-tailed by looking at the alternative hypothesis. Oops. And so if you're someone who struggled with inequality words, here's just a reminder. Some that students forget, kind of at least, is going to be your greater than or equal to. And remember, it matters if it's equal to, because if it's equal to, it's automatically going to go into the null. If it's got an equal to, it goes into the null. And if it doesn't, then it's going to go into the alternative. So we do need to know if our claim here has an equal to. So at most, these are the ones that usually students have the most trouble with. All right, so for example 1, a trade group predicts that back to school spending will average, ding, 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 $606.40 per family this year. A different economic model is needed if the prediction is wrong. Specify the null and alternative hypothesis to determine if a different economic model is needed. So first we have the word average, which means we're going to be talking about mu. So then the next word is we have different economic. When they talk about different, that is a not equal to word. Okay, so first I like to always set it up as our null and our alternative. So we know that we're dealing with mu, so I'm going to start here with mu because we say average. Oops, sorry, I should remove those symbols. We don't know the symbols yet. Now they say that the average is this amount, so it is equal to, and so because it is a null, we know that equal to is here, and because they say different, what contradicts that is not equal to. And so this would be the null and alternative hypothesis. And we're going to do a few of these, so don't worry if you're not quite getting it. Example 2, an advertisement for a popular weight loss clinic suggests that participants in its new diet program experience an average, ding, 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 we're talking about the mu, weight loss of more than 10 pounds. Okay, so now we've got a little more here. A consumer activist wants to determine if the claim is valid. Specify the null and alternative. So I always start with the null and alternative and the symbols. We know it's mu. Okay, now the only thing we know is that the clinic claims more than 10. More than is greater than 10. It does not have equality, so it must go into the alternative. So this is what the clinic claims. An activist wants to determine if it's valid. Remember okay, now we've got this. The opposite, contradict this, would be less than or equal to 10. And this is the advertisement's claim. And I like to write that so I remember in the end, what happened, what are we trying to say here. So the advertisement is claiming that it's greater than 10. All right, let's do, let's see here. Yep. And example 3 here. A television research analyst wished to test a claim that more than 50% of the households will tune in for a TV episode. Now, I don't see the word average, but I do see a percent, which makes me think it's P. So I always start, now we're dealing with the population proportion, so we're dealing with P. And they want to test a claim that more than 50%. So more than does not have equality, so it goes down here, 0.5. And this is the claim that they're testing. They're testing the claim that more than 50%. And the opposite, what contradicts greater than, would be less than or equal to. Now, I just want to go back in here and talk about what it would mean if we were to reject. Oh, I'll do one more example and then we'll do that. So it is generally believed that at least 60% of the residents in a small town in Texas are happy with their lives. A sociologist wonders whether recent economic woes have adversely affected the happiness level in this town. Specify the null and alternative. So the null and alternative. All right, I see a percent, so I know I'm dealing with P, and it doesn't say average. Now I know I'm dealing with 0.60. So what are my symbols? I see the word at least. At least means greater than or equal to. Equal to means null. So then the opposite, greater than or equal to, be less than. A sociologist wonders whether this has affected. So they want to know, this is what they're wondering. Is it actually less than now? This is the sociologist claim, and maybe that's better. All right, so now let's think about what it means if you were to reject the null. So here you go, if this helps you here. All right, so if we want to determine if the sociologist's concern is valid, that means we would believe the alternative. So we would want to reject the null, right? We would want to have this, reject the null if the concern was valid, if we want to support the claim. So to support the claim, support the concern, we would want to reject the null. So if we reject the null, we support the claim there. Let's look at this one. If the claim is that it's more than 50, a television research wishes to test a claim that more than 50%. So we want to support this claim. If we wanted to support this claim, what would need to happen? Well, we would need to reject the null, right? So we would reject the null. All right, let's look at this one here. The advertisement claim here, if it's more than 50, this is what the advertisement claims. But this person is actually curious. This activist wants to determine if it's valid. So this is really the activist's claim. So here, they are curious if the claim is valid. And it depends how you want to do this. If we reject the null, then the ad claim is valid. If we do not reject the null, then the activist claim is valid. So that kind of gives you an idea of rejecting and not rejecting. So go ahead and give these a try, and then press play when you're ready to see the solution. We're going to come back and do type 1 and type 2 consequences in a quick video.